Hi everybody, it's Manie from BigNLittleMinecraft. But today what we're going to do is something very special. I'm all excited. What we're going to be doing today is my gaming rig that I've actually been using for quite some time. We're actually going to be switching out the motherboard. And I thought while I was doing that, it might be kind of fun to show you guys. If you've ever replaced a motherboard or you were thinking about it, I'm hoping that this will actually help you in your endeavors to maybe step up to a different motherboard, maybe do a little bit of an expansion for the motherboard that you currently have, whatever it may be, okay? So what we're going to be using today actually is a Crosshair 5 Formaula Z motherboard. Now this is from Asus. This is a Republic of Gamers motherboard. It's pretty much specifically designed for gaming. It is for the AM3 and AM3 Plus CPUs, the Central Processing Unit. Okay, this is not an Intel motherboard. Now, my server that I use for playing multiplayer and stuff like that on Minecraft and that one is an Intel board. That one's a little older, but that's not the one that I play my games on. So playing Minecraft, Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, SimCity, some of those I haven't actually uploaded any videos to, and I'm hoping that I will be able to soon. I'm not sure about the Battlefield 4. There's some pretty colorful metaphors in that, and I'm not sure that I want to put that on my channel. It's nothing against the game. It's just the way that the game is, and I'm not really sure that I want to use that. So we'll see how it goes. Anyway, but we're also going to be using a pair of NVIDIA GeForce 660 Ti's. Now, these actually are set up for running the NVIDIA SLI. So we're going to be using those. I used to use on my old motherboard for quite a while, and if you've seen some of the videos, you probably know that stopped working because I was using the AMD Crossfire. Now, AMD Crossfire is a lot like the SLI setup. It basically allows you to use multiple GPUs, and before I was actually using a pair of 6770s, I believe it was, in a Crossfire setup, which allowed me to utilize both graphics cards. But in this new setup, what we're going to be doing is we're actually going to be using a pair of NVIDIA 660 Ti's. Now, I do actually have one more graphics card. It's an EVGA 660 Ti, which, depending on how things go, I might end up putting that in so I can run a triple SLI. But a lot of things that I've read online, it doesn't really give you that much more performance. So a standard graphics card like this one will set your performance up to a certain bar, and running SLI will increase that bar. It won't necessarily double it, but it will increase it quite a bit. But then if you run triple SLI, depending on the setup that you have and whether or not you're overclocking, whether or not you're using liquid cooling for your processor and stuff, it actually only increases just a little bit more. So there's not a huge performance increase by running triple SLI versus just a dual SLI, which was what we're going to be doing today. Now, there's a couple things I'm going to cover in the video. The first thing is I'm actually going to take my machine and we're going to put it up on the table here, and we'll move the camera around so you guys can get a really good shot. And what we're going to do is, the first thing that we'll do is the tear down. Alright, so I'll show you how to uninstall all of your components first out of the old machine. After that's set up, then what we'll do is we'll go to installing our new products, which is going to be the Republic of Gamers motherboard and the new 660 Ti graphics cards. So I hope you guys are excited as I am, because I've been waiting for this for like a really long time. This is like a super bump and an upgrade for me, and I am super stoked. So, alright, here we go, guys. Okay guys, and we're back. So what I did was I took my machine out from underneath of the spot in my desk where I keep it, and what we actually have here is, this is a Thermaltake V9. All right, that's the manufacturer of this case. All right, now I've decorated it with all of its fun stuff, so you can see my EVGA powered by ASUS Corsair and all of that fun stuff. And then on the side, I mean, it's not your own case if you don't decorate it a little bit. But anyway, so one of the first things that you want to do when you get your setup ready to go is that you kind of want to have a map or a plan of where you're going to be putting things. You want to make sure that your case can actually handle what you're going to be doing. All right, so in our case, because of the fact that we're using a Republic of Gamers motherboard and some high-end graphics cards, the number one thing that we're going to want to make sure of is that we have plenty of airflow. Now, one of the reasons that I did get this Thermaltake V9 is because it has some massive airflow. All right. Now on the top, I'll see if I can bend this over a little bit so you can see it. Up on the top, that's a pretty massive fan. That's a 230 millimeter fan. It actually moves quite a bit of air. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's somewhere around the neighborhood of like 95 cubic feet per minute or something. Don't quote me on that. Please don't quote me. Some of the numbers that I rattle off may be right on the money, they may not, okay? But it does have a couple other vents here and over here, all right? Now, the hard drive area is fairly close to right here, all right? And then this is the actual backside of where the CPU is at. So this does allow for a little bit of heat dissipation. Now, not a lot, all right, because this is the backside of the motherboard. So it's not going to dissipate as much heat as it would on the front side of the motherboard over here, all right? Now, in the back, one of the nice things that I like about this, and hopefully you guys will be able to see all this, now down at the bottom, which I know is kind of hard to see because of the way that the camera's placed, now this is the PSU, the power supply unit, okay? It has its own dedicated 120 millimeter fan. This is actually a Thermaltake 850 watt. So it actually provides quite a bit of power. It's nice because it's I don't know if it's bronze certified. I want to say that it is. I'd actually have to look up the specs, and if you're curious about that power supply, there's plenty of information out there. It's a Thermaltake 850 watt power supply, and I don't really want to call it a code name, but it's named the Black Widow. Alright, now on the front side, now you'll have to excuse my little thing here, okay? What I end up having to do, because I have a water cooler on the inside, and this fan, the way that it sits originally, alright, does not quite fit with the radiator from the water cooler, alright? Because you have your water cooler and then your fan, and that sits in so far that I actually had to move the fan down just a little ways in order to actually make it all fit. So what we're going to do here next is we're going to go ahead and break open the case, and I'll show you the inside of the motherboard and how we're going to take all the pieces apart and get ready for our install. Alright guys, so what I did is I took off this top panel. Forgive me, you won't be able to see my face during all this. I don't have a good way to explain everything and try and do everything all at the same time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down some of the actual components for you in case you didn't know. There might be some people out there that aren't sure what this is, what that is, blah, 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 blah. Now, one of the first things that you definitely want to do is you want to make sure that before you go in and start messing with any of the components, that you have depleted the energy supply of the actual components themselves. So on the PSU, the power supply unit here, you want to make sure that that switch is off, all right? And what I've done is I've turned it on, turned it off, and I've pressed my power button up on the case a couple times just to make sure that all the power has actually been drained from the system. Okay, that's critical, very critical. Now, like I was saying, I'm sure if you tilt your head right or whatever, this is a Thermaltake TR2RX 850 watt power supply. This is it is a bronze plus. Okay, it is an 80 plus bronze certified, so that's a good thing because what it does is it's 80% efficient. So that means out of all the energy it uses, 80% of it is actually going to be efficiently used for your devices. All right. Now, once you start using a whole lot more power, like if you're overclocking, running multiple GPUs, kind of like what we're going to be doing with this, then what ends up happening is it might not be as efficient. Okay, so just kind of bear with me here. So we have our power supply unit here. This is our GeForce GTX. This is the one that I already had installed on the machine that I've been using for a little while. This here is actually our sound blaster. This is our sound card, or audio card. Some people like to call it one way or the other. This big block here, this is what I was talking about. This is our Corsair water cooler. Now this is an H60. All right, for those who are wondering, this is an H60 water cooler, and it does utilize a 120 millimeter fan for that. Now underneath of my my little RAM setup here, okay, I do have some Corsair Vengeance memory. Now this little setup here is optional. It's not a requirement for you to have it. I like to use it because I like to keep everything as cool as absolutely possible. And please forgive some of the dust. I just started tearing this up. Didn't have time to go through and try and clean any of this stuff. So my fans are a little bit dirty. I probably should get those cleaned up while I have everything all the way open. Okay. Now the processor does sit up underneath it here. All right. I don't know if you can see that. Hopefully you can. But right there, that's the water block for the CPU. All right. Now I do have a couple of, actually I only have one optical drive, which is right here. Okay. This is just my one DVD drive or CD drive, and then above it, and actually I'll show you that here in a little while, is an Antec hot swap bay. So what this does is this allows me to take a hard drive, kind of like this one here. Alright, so with a SATA connection, alright, I don't know if you're going to be able to see that. Hopefully the light looks okay in that one. But with a SATA connection is these little flat pins here. Okay, the old hard drives used to have like a whole bunch of little copper pins along one side. They've changed these now to where it's a SATA connection, and you're going to see that it's just this section right here. All right, so this is actually a 1 terabyte desktop hard drive. It's 3.5 inches wide, I think it is. I think so. Anyway. But it's just a standard desktop hard drive. The nice part is I can just plug it right in just like this, and bink, there it is. Okay, so the hard drive is installed and ready to go. Alright, so we'll take that out because we're not going to need that. This is just one of the drives that I use for when I'm recording. Alright, so now this part right here, alright, this is actually my hard drive that I use for the computer itself. Now this is not a solid state drive. It's a thin drive. It's very thin, but it is 1 terabyte. It's a new drive. Very thin, but it's fast. It's a 6 gigabyte per second SATA 3, so it's pretty quick. I don't quite have the funds yet to get a solid state drive, but that'll be an upgrade sometime in the future. And I don't think I'll do any type of video on that because it's pretty simple. What we're going to do right now is we're just going to go ahead and go through the teardown. So the easiest place to start really is just your add-in cards. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to want to pull these PCIe cables. All right, now some power supplies, if it's like this one here is designed for gaming, will actually have a PCIe, and what this is some of them have just a 6-pin, and some of them are a 6+2 pin. All right, so some graphics cards, instead of having 2 6-pins together like this, they'll either have just one 6-pin, or they'll have an 8-pin, and that's where you need to have those extra 2 to connect. So you just kind of fit it around a little bit like this, and then you end up with an 8-pin PCIe power connector, just like that. Okay, and then that would fit into your not in your motherboard, into your graphics card. Some of them, like this guy here, actually require 2 6-pin. All right, so we have that set up already. Now what we need to do is, this has all quick release stuff, so it's kind of nice. Sometimes in the back here you actually have to use like the screwdriver, and there'd be a little screw. Now with your sound card, like I said, this here is a Sound Blaster, and I'm trying to remember, this one is not a Sound Blaster FX, this is a Sound Blaster Z or Fatality, I'm not really sure. But it was about an $80 card. I believe. And it's kind of nice because it does give you plenty of different inputs and outputs. So like you've got your microphone, your headphone, your surround if you're doing that, and it does give you your SPDIF, which is SPDIF. Now what that is it's an optical cable. So what it does is this basically uses like light or like a laser. I'm not sure if it's a laser, but I know it's like it's a light transmission. So it actually transmits light through a cord into your device that you're going to be using. So if that's like a surround sound or something like that, sometimes they'll have these, and you'll find them more often on like home theater systems. They'll actually have these, and they're a great way to transfer your sound, because then your sound arrives at basically the same time, if not right at the exact same time that your audio, or not your audio, your video actually shows up on your screen. So not a whole lot of lag there. The one thing you want to try and be careful of is these pins down here, okay, these little gold fingers as they call them. You want to make sure that you don't touch those. You don't want to get any of the grease from your hands and stuff like that. Now speaking of touching stuff, I'm sure that there's probably going to be somebody saying, hey, you didn't discharge, you're not wearing a wrist wrap, blah 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 blah. Depending on the circumstances and everything that you're in, it's not necessarily a requirement to wear a wrist strap. A lot of the circuitry is fairly tough. Now, I say that in the hopes that nobody's going to take me absolutely literally and go scraping their feet around the carpet and then try and touch the motherboard to see whether or not they can get a spark. You do that, it's pretty much a guarantee that your motherboard's going to be toast. Now, like I said, a lot of these components nowadays do not have that same type of susceptibility to them like they used to. Now, your graphics card, usually there's like a little, you can see it right down in here, okay? There's a little tab that you just push down, or sometimes they'll actually have some, what is your deal here? They'll actually have some that actually push to the side a little bit. And, oh, I see what your deal is. Okay, that's just because Manie's a dork. Alright, come on. Why you no come free? I don't understand what's going on with you. What is the deal here? Something's catching us up. I'm not sure. Oh, there it goes. Okay, alright. So, this is our NVIDIA 660 Ti. Alright, pretty hefty little booger. Alright, it's nice, and it has what we call a turbo fan on the back. And what this does is this actually blows, it sucks air in through the side and then it blows it out the front. Alright, so that's why there's the little fins up here on the front, okay, and that's where the heat is actually dissipated. Now, depending on your setup that you're using and everything, you can set these up so that they run automatically, so that the fan speed is just taken care of by the actual card itself, or they do actually have software out there like MSI Afterburner is one of the programs I use, and what it does is it basically, I can dictate the fan speed. So if I feel that the graphics card's getting a little too hot, like sometimes when I play like Minecraft, this card by itself will heat up to around 70 degrees C. Now that's pretty warm. And if you guys need to figure out what temperature that is for Fahrenheit so that you can figure that part out, there's actually, if you just go to Google and type in Celsius, it'll give you a converter right there. You just type in whatever degrees and it'll tell you. But I know that that's pretty warm. It's not the absolute threshold. They can go warmer than that, but you really don't want to, especially if you're doing some hardcore gaming. You want those to actually run a little cooler so you can actually manually tell the fan that you want it to spin faster. Now, the faster that it spins, the more noise it's going to create, and sometimes people don't like that noise. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set that over here. Alright, now the next spot, what we're probably going to do is, since we have the graphics cards out of the way, because that thing is such a beast, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take out our RAM cooler. Alright, so, and all this is it's just a little bridge type thing that you can set up, and all it does is these here just kind of connect onto the edges of your locks. or whatever you want to call those. Please forgive me, I don't know all the technical terms, you know, I'm not that great at it, but hey, it is what it is. So we'll put that over here to the side. I'm going to grab a drink here right quick. Good stuff, tea. Good for you. Alright, so the next thing we've got is the actual RAM modules. Now those are down here. Alright, hopefully you guys can see this. It's kind of hard to tell with me looking up at my camcorder there. But what we're going to do is, these usually have just little latches, okay? You pull those latches off that side. On the other side you can do the same thing. If I can get my fat fingers up in there. Alright, so once you get all of those free, you can just pull them right on out. So I'm actually using the Crosshair Vengeance. Alright, hopefully you can see that, and they have the raised fins up here for heat dissipation. Pretty nice RAM. Now this is 1600 megahertz RAM, and for those of you that are actually interested, the timings on these are actually 10, 10, 10, and 27, and these are 1.5 volt memory sticks. So I don't know if that's going to focus in right or not. You may have to like pause it or look at it or whatever if you want, but that's basically what they are. And they're good RAM. They've actually they've done really well. They actually help the performance of the machine. And these are actually 8 gigabyte sticks. So each one is actually 8 gigabytes. So that gives me a total of 32 gigabytes total for the actual build. All right. So we're getting down to it, guys. We're down to just a few items left. Now the one thing that we're not going to have to do is remove our solid state and our other drives over here. I know I was saying that I was going to show you that, but I think that's kind of self-explanatory. If you're not sure, you can just go to like Newegg or something like that and look up hot swap a hard drive bay, and it'll tell you everything that you need to know right there. Now there are a couple of tools that I would strongly recommend that you guys use. All right, one of them is going to be a decent set of like needle nose pliers. There's some times where it's hard to get into a spot, especially if you've got fat fingers like I do, okay? So putting some things together or whatever, it's handy to have a set of pliers. Now, it would be nice if they could make a set of needle nose pliers somewhat like this and like a neoprene or a non-metallic. That would be sweet. Maybe one of you guys should invent that. Alright, the next thing that you're going to want is a solid number 2 Phillips screwdriver. Alright, number 2 is great because it's going to fit almost all the screws on your board. You can use a number 1, but depending on what you're doing, it might strip it out. The other thing that you'll want to use is a flat tip screwdriver. Now, with a flat tip or a standard screwdriver, you're not going to use it very often, but it does come in very handy. So that's just something that you're going to want to keep in mind, okay? Now, what I'm going to do here, I'm actually going to move this around just a little bit, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to take off the actual water cooler. All right. Now it's important, like these, I don't know, I'm sure it's probably hard to see, but there's a little washer right here. Okay, you don't want to lose that washer. All right. So it's what I usually do is I pick a spot over here on my desk that's set up to where I can actually just set all my screws, and they're all in a kind of like a designated area. Let's put it that way. So that they're all organized and I don't have to worry about them taking off on me, that type of thing, okay? So, now the other thing that you want to do is while you're taking things apart or putting them together is, see, now it's moving, alright? So we don't want that to move around on us. We want that to stay still. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to kind of hold it in place for a second, and especially with the radiator, you want to be pretty careful, okay? Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take that and set it up over here on the side. With your radiator, you want to be careful because these fins, if I can put that up there so you can see it, these fins are pretty fragile, okay? You don't want to push on them, you don't want to touch them, and you definitely don't want to say, oh, does this? Yeah, that would be a very bad idea. Don't do that. Alright, so now I know that you can't see this, but what I'm going to do is I'm unplugging the this is the connector for the fan speed control, because without this connector being connected to it, the computer or the motherboard doesn't see that there's a fan for the actual CPU, and it'll stop. Alright, it won't work. You can try all you want, but it's just not going to work. Get those out of the way. Now this cooler has been set up for an AMD, an AM3 motherboard. Okay, so the connectors on this are going to be a little different than if it was for like an Intel build. Alright, so now what I find is usually if you just kind of take this and just twist it back and forth a little bit, usually it'll just pop right up out of there. Alright, so you can see our thermal grease on the underside. Thermal grease, thermal paste, tomato, whichever. Alright, now right there, that is the heart of our beast. Okay, that's our CPU. Now it's a little dirty, not really dirty per se. It's well, it has that thermal paste on there. And before we go any further, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pause the video because I need to get something to clean it up with before I take it out. So I'll be right back, guys. Okay, and we're back. So what I find that works fairly well is just a good old-fashioned paper towel. Okay, you just want to be kind of careful with it. Now this stuff, because the machine was running for a little while before I actually came in here to do this trade out and everything, so the thermal paste is actually fairly, what do you want to say here? It's not real hard, because when thermal paste actually cools off, it's actually pretty stiff. Put that over there. And it's kind of hard to spread. So you'll find that when you go to putting that on, and it looks like I probably put a little too much on here. That's an awesome thing to tell people. Oh yeah, I put too much thermal paste on my deal. Well, the thing about it is it's actually better to have used a little bit too much than not enough. Now, speaking of, oh man, I got that all over my hands. Yuck. Speaking of thermal paste, there's a couple of notes that I want to share with you. It is very important that you use a decent thermal paste, and what we're going to be using for our build today is actually the Antec 7. Alright, this is what I used last time on this one, and this is what I'm going to be using again on this time. Now, it's always good to have extra. It sucks when you don't have enough. So that's what we're going to be using today is the Antec 7. Alright, now with your processor, it's imperative that you are in a static free zone. If you have the original stuff that the processor came in so that you can set it back in that temporarily while you switch out your board, absolutely awesome. Alright, that's the best way to do it. Now, I don't actually have that anymore. I was kind of a dork and I got rid of it, so what we're going to do is very, very carefully, we're just going to lift that straight up and out. There's your processor, okay? The one thing that you definitely don't want to do is, because of the heat, is you don't want to touch those pins. Alright, it's very important that you don't touch those. Those have to stay straight. If for some reason one of them gets bent or is crooked or whatever, you'll have a time putting it back in there, and these are what's considered a ZIF. That's ZIF, and what that stands for is zero insertion force. So you should be able to take that processor and basically just drop it straight in and it's done. Okay, so I'm going to lift that back up a little bit so that you guys can kind of see what I'm doing. You just very simply straight up and out. Alright, there's your processor. So we're actually going to set him up over on the side here, out of the way. Alright, so now we're down to basically just almost nothing but our motherboard itself. Now, let's go ahead and take that fan off. We'll keep him over there because he's part of our CPU cooler. Now what I am going to do is I'm going to close this back over, because what happens is those little holes there in the socket, you don't want those exposed. You don't want dust getting down in there and all of that. That would just be a bad idea. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm actually going to have to start kind of removing some of the cords, the SATA connections, you know, these down here or whatever. we've got to get those taken off so that way we can get our new motherboard actually put back in. So this one here is your 20 plus 4, and the reason that I say it's a 20 plus 4 pin is because on some of these, and I don't remember, no, this one doesn't do it. So on some power supplies, what they'll do is on this connection here, all right, if you count out 20, blah, 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 all right, there's 20 of them up here, and then this last 4, whether, I don't know if it's, I think it's this side, it doesn't really make any difference, but this one would actually disconnect because some motherboards actually have your main motherboard power connection here only has 20 pins. And what that does is it provides power to all these different things. Some of them, like this one, because this is an entry-level gaming board, it actually has a 24 pin. So some power supplies will give you a 20 pin plus 4, and what that means is you just take that extra 4 pins and put it together and then slap it on there. That's all it's for. All right, but we're going to set him kind of up out of the way because I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think that power supply to the motherboard actually sits in relatively about the same place. Yeah, pretty close to it. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to separate our SATA connections. Okay. Now, what I am going to be doing for this one, because this is I don't want to call it a new build, but it's I am kind of rebuilding this, is I'm not actually going to use these SATA cords anymore. There's actually some SATA cords that came with the motherboard, and there's been a lot of different talk. Some people say, well, if it's this kind of deal, it's only a 3 gig per second, and you need to use these that are 6 gig per second. Well, the simple fact of the matter is, it boils down to the fact that a SATA cord is a SATA cord is a SATA cord. You might see a very, very small amount of speed difference between this cord and the ones that came with the board. All right, so there's really not very much difference as far as how that goes. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take those off. Now these little wires down here, okay, these are the ones that actually turn the system on. So these are the ones that that when you press your power button or your reset button and all of that fun stuff, okay, that's what turns those on. So they should be labeled, and they are. This one says reset SW. Now I'd try and show you that, but that's pretty small. This one is our power switch, and then we have the hard drive indicator and a power LED. Now the reason I'm not concerned about which order that those go in, because in our other one, our new motherboard, it actually comes with a I don't know what you'd want to call it. It's not really a bridge, but it's a device. It's just a little piece of plastic with a pin set in it. You basically connect all these to that, and then right on top. Makes it simple. It's already pre-labeled. You don't have to worry about it. These little wires here, these are our USB ports. So like our USB ports that are up on the top here, that's what's connected to these. All right. So you have those little guys there, and then this one over here on this far end, and this is usually where it's at on most motherboards, is the audio. So if your case has front side audio ports, so the microphone and the headphones, okay, that's where this is going to go, and it's usually located down towards this corner of the actual motherboard itself. So we're just going to go ahead and unplug him. We'll kind of pull these wires out of the way, and you'll notice that on this actual build, I actually ran a lot of the stuff underneath of the motherboard. Now what I'm thinking about doing is, when we go to put this new motherboard in, is I'm actually probably going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to run a lot of this stuff from behind, but what I may end up doing is on the back side of the case here, I'm going to utilize this area, all right, because there is actually enough room to come out through here and then up through the back, and then that way we don't actually have the motherboard sitting on our cords, which I didn't actually think about that until it was a little bit later. Now up at the very top, I know that you guys can barely see that, but right here, hopefully you guys can see that, is the actual 8-pin motherboard connection. Now this motherboard takes quite a bit of power. This new one takes even more. So what we're going to do is I'm going to pop that one off. set him up to the side and out of the way a little bit. Alright. Now, we've gotten all of our connections so that there's no more wires and stuff like that connected to our motherboard, right? So what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and put these kind of back in their locked position temporarily, just keep them out of the way. What we're going to do now is we're actually going to take the old motherboard out. Now, some people will say it's good to use a magnetic screwdriver, others will say it's a bad idea. Now, I do actually use a magnetic screwdriver. Most motherboards, like I said, are not as susceptible to the different things like they used to be. And when the unit is completely powered off and you're in an electrostatic free zone, which I'm not going to say that I'm in an electrostatic free zone. I mean, I'm pretty well taken care of. I mean, I'm keeping constant contact with the actual case. You know, the power supply has its own grounding mechanism built into it. I mean, I'm not going to say that that's, you know, going to take care of everything. Please don't take that the wrong way. But as long as you're pretty much in constant contact with the case, you're not really going to build up enough of a static charge to do anything, because the case itself is actually going to rid the excess static from you. Now, if you're scraping your feet back and forth across the carpet or something, that might be a little bit of a different story. You'd probably be in trouble then. But for everything that we're doing right now, we really don't have to worry about it too awful much. So now the size of this board, their measurements are given by like either a micro, a mini, ATX, a standard ATX, full ATX, which I think is the same as a standard ATX, and then there is extended ATX or eATX, and there's even one that's even bigger than that. This is a standard ATX board. Alright, so now that that's come out of there, just go ahead and lift this up out. Maybe. Come on, get off of there. There we go. Alright, so there's our motherboard. Alright, that's the one that we've been using. We've been playing on, doing the Minecraft, doing the Modern Warfare 4, SimCity, you know, all of those fun games or anything. This is what I've been using for like a really long time, and it's got some pretty nice features. So if you look at the back, you do actually have, and surprisingly enough, I do actually use a PS2 keyboard, guys. I haven't gotten a USB keyboard. I like the way that mine feels. But a PS2 keyboard and mouse, it has USB 3.0. It does have the optical out for the SPDIF. Alright, you get USB 2.0s back here, an Ethernet port, which is a 10-100-1000 Ethernet, so it's pretty quick, and another couple of USB ports, and then your 5.1 or 7.1 sound out of the back. Now, almost every single motherboard that I've ever seen is going to have its own audio. Whether or not you decide to use that audio or not is up to you. That's why I got my own sound card, because the sound that was using when I was using my headphone set and using this, the sound quality wasn't as good, and that's why I changed to a sound card. That improved it, but then I went ahead and I got a Yeti from Blue, and that microphone is actually a USB microphone, so it goes into a USB port here, and that actually sounds much better. It took me a little while to get that all figured out, but anyway, this is a very nice board. It's an awesome entry-level board, so anybody that's wanting to get one, this is actually the, I'll put this up here so that hopefully you guys can see that, but down here, if I'm not mistaken, it says it's an M5A97. Now, there are the M5A97 Pros, Evos, and M5A Revision 2, I think. They're basically the exact same board. The BIOS has some different functions, but this is a very good board. I have absolutely enjoyed all the time that I've had with this board, but it's just time for an upgrade. So what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start working on these cords and stuff in here, and what I'll probably do is I'll set the camera back and let it continue to record, but what I'm going to do is a little bit of a speed deal. So what we'll do is we'll turn on the Minecraft hyper mode, and we'll see you guys in just a little bit.